Okay, I'm there till like 5:30.
You have some on Friday.
Same
as
on
well.
Friday, same on Thursday, every afternoon. Just come around, just come find me. All right, so we're going to go into this chemistry, attraction, why you like who you do, why you're attracted to who you are. So some of this we're going to talk about the scientific sort of studies and the biology of this. Types of attraction, sex differences in attraction, evolutionary theory of attraction, pheromones and chemistry, evidence and controversy. So we're going to go over all of this stuff. This is a little bit of review, so I'm going to fly through some of these things because we've already talked about some key elements of attraction. This is focusing more on the chemistry part, which then will get us into the love section. I'll talk about love tomorrow. This is the action or power of evoking interest, pleasure, or liking for something or someone. That's what sort of attraction is defined as. Other synonyms are things like appeal, attractiveness, allure, animal magnetism. Is it controlled by biological or social influences or both? What would you guys say? Both. Right? It's usually not nature or nurture. It's both. It's a combination of your genetics, predetermined factors, and then social experiences throughout your life. Types of attraction, there are lots. Physical attraction, this is on the basis of beauty, right? Just physical looks. So in the media, models, those are the things that sort of influence that and are part of that. And universal features that sort of everybody finds appealing. Usually you find in some of these kind of models and media persona individuals. Interpersonal attraction, this is more between people, right? Where it's more than just the physical attraction. It's components of their personality. It can lead to friendships, actual, relationships, romantic relationships. So this is more getting to know that actual person, not just how they physically look. It's also defined as sort of the force acting between two people that tends to draw them together and kind of resist their separation. So almost like magnetism, right? Drawn to people. And I'm not saying this doesn't have to be even with someone that you're sexually attracted to. This is just attraction between individuals. And I know you all know that. You've met people. I think I described this with there's a duo right there. I described this with one of my close friends here, one of my colleagues here, and right when I met her, I knew I liked her. Like I just knew. I didn't know much about her, but I felt a kind of a gravitational pull towards this individual. Like we're just going to be friends. I know we're going to be friends. For whatever reason, I don't even know why. It's there. Excuse me. Sexual attraction. All right, so this is where attraction on the basis of sexual desire or the quality of arousing such interest, okay? And notice this is different than just physical attraction or interpersonal attraction. This is the actual component of sexual attraction to another individual. This is a major factor in partner choice. When people line up and kind of pair up with somebody else, it's sort of a key component to that. All right, what are we attracted to? Physical traits and other qualities. So not just physical things. There are a lot of other dynamic elements that are a part of this process. Aesthetics, right? So looks and adornment and different features of the person. Movements. Believe it or not, movements, in a lot of studies people find this like dancers, especially dancers, or when people dance, they notice movement and qualities in other people. I know as a dancer, you probably like people that can dance. Maybe. There are things that you notice and you notice about the way they walk or the way they move or the way they dance. Those things are attractive to people. Voice is also another component. You may not think of that really, but sometimes certain voices are like nails on a chalkboard to you. And other times you're like, wow, they have a really sultry voice. That's a great, I know women that have such nice voices to me, and I'm like, every time I see them, you have such a nice voice. You should be a singer or something. Just sultry feel to their voice. Smell is another component. And we're going to get into pheromones and olfaction and smell in just a minute. And this is kind of an often overlooked element because we're not like a lot of the other mammals and animals in the animal kingdom. We don't have a big fat VMO, vomeronasal organ, that picks up a lot of different pheromones. Ours is really teeny tiny. But smell is really, really important. And actually, if you look at the literature and you even talk to women and men about their attraction experiences, and especially people in long relationships, one of the things that always comes up is they love how the other person smells. They don't know why, but like they love the way they smell. I love the back of their head and their hair, and even when they're stinky, they smell good. Like these are common things that come up. So that is often overlooked element. So a lot of attraction is enhanced by adornments, clothing, perfume, cologne, style, all those different things can grab people's attention in different ways. It's influenced, notice, by cultural and psychological factors. So based on where you live, geography, culture, customs, and psychological, social, interpersonal elements in yourself, that can affect all of these things. And there's a lot of variability between people. There's been a lot of attempts to devise and measure objective criteria for sexual attractiveness. Now notice I'm saying not physical attractiveness, sexual attractiveness, what you would specifically be drawn to, not just based on what somebody looks like. But this is too subjective. It's all over the place. One person can be like, I love the smell, I love the movements, I love this. I don't care about voice, I don't care about clothes, I love personality and humor, and like, that is all over the place. So there's a lot of variability between people. What about biological and genetic factors? Do you think this comes into play into any of this sexual attractive metric? Yeah, it does. And we're going to go over some of those studies that look at that. Some of them are a little weird, but some are very cool. So the sexual senses, this is review. The predominant human sexual senses, what are they?
Touch.
Right, so tactile, touch, what else?
Smell.
Smell, what else?
Taste.
Taste, what else? There's two of the most important really when it comes to sort of this sexual senses and the sexual response, and that is vision and touch, tactile. Those are two of the most important. Smell is also a big component as well. So vision, touch, tactile sensations, smell, hearing. Notice the main sexual organ though, taking in all these stimuli, is the brain. The main sexual organ is the brain. It's not the genitals, it's not the reproductive tract, it's not the parts of the body that are erogenous zones that we went over, it's actual the brain, right? The brain is taking in all of these special senses and information and making sense of it and processing it. All right, so there are some sex differences in attraction. So based on males and females and their different types of attraction, in general, males have a greater interest in casual, uncommitted sex. It's just in general, looking at a lot of different research studies and surveys. Men have greater interest in visual sexual stimuli, so we'd say a little bit more in general visual oriented. And notice I'm saying in general, so it's not every male, it's not every female. This is in general looking at the majorities. Men have greater emphasis on physical attractiveness, so the physical aesthetics of what somebody looks like is important for most. Greater tendency of sexual jealousy, lots of studies and research looking at this, like looking at males and females, and greater tendency for that type of jealousy. Females in general, greater interest in partner status. Status can come in a lot of different forms, and status can be things like height, wealth, money, position, educational, socioeconomic background, educational level. It's like status. It comes along with that individual. Women have a greater interest in that in general. Women have more emotional jealousy. So emotional, sort of interpersonal jealousy, not so much sexual jealousy. So there's a little bit of the differences there in some of these studies have reported. I'm not going to show this, but it's super silly if you've ever watched this. It's kind of ridiculous.
It's so bad.
It's so ridiculous that there's a lot. He's actually a cop. He's like a special ops cop, and he put this together, this crazy, hot YouTube matrix that went viral. He was talking about women that are the crazy and hot, and you want to sort of get one that's way over here, that's real hot and very little crazy. But notice his bottom of crazy is 4. So there is no 1, he said, because that doesn't exist in women, because there's always a level 4 minimum of crazy in a woman. Sort of hilarious, but I'm not endorsing this. I just thought it was sort of ridiculous. So then there was a female version that came out. Did you see this one? That was a follow-up.
Yeah.
She said emotional unavailability, hot. So it's the same sort of matrix, and it's just sort of the opposite. The thing that this illustrated was sort of stereotypes, and also the way many men view women and the way many women view men. So these sort of stigmatized stereotypes that are like perpetuated. But you gotta watch hers, it's super hilarious. I'm not gonna spend the whole hour. They're like 5-10 minutes long, but it's pretty funny. Just do crazy hot matrix, like the woman version, or the girl. It's like a mimicking or mocking the other one, sort of. All right, we've talked about this in the past before when I introduced attraction. This is the evolutionary theory of human attraction. You're drawn to physical features indicating good fertility and health. So remember, you guys already knew this, and we were talking about this. Basic physical attractiveness, that's sort of universal. What are those things that might indicate fertility and good health? Right, Drew, right. Waist to hip ratio, yes. Okay, waist to hip ratio. Symmetry, right, of the face and body, symmetry. So waist hip or W to H ratio. Facial symmetry. Men really prefer ideal waist-hip ratio. It varies by region. So in some areas, a little thicker, a little bigger in that ratio, and other areas, smaller in that ratio. Notice if you're a 0.7, you have a very small waist and big hips, right? Closer you are to 1, you're more like a male, right? Where your waist and your hips are real similar. They're in alignment, right? So that varies, but it's pretty universal. The male eye tends to go towards that waist-hip ratio. That's ideal. Women, again, sort of good status. Height has been really strongly associated with physical attractiveness. High shoulder to waist, or STW ratio. Remember we talked about this one? Shoulders to waist, the triangle, like the Dorito. Someone say Dorito. The Dorito. And also masculine face. Now you might not realize this. The effects of testosterone or androgens, they change skeletal bones. They can affect elongation of the digits and the limbs, and they can masculinize the face. That means making the jaw or the mandible more prominent, and the brow or the frontal bone more prominent as well. There's actually little features and acts that can change faces and make them look more feminized and more masculinized, just changing the physical anatomy of those proportions or those faces. They've done, I think I did this one, I can't remember. You can put in different pictures and different people and actually do the masculinization and the feminization, so basically narrowing the mandible, reducing the brow furrow or that ridge, the frontal bone. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Oh my gosh, just making dots everywhere. Or widening out the jaw and increasing the brow line. And there are just a lot of little apps and things. And studies where they looked at physical attractiveness and what different males and females rate as attractive or not. Yeah?
I was just wondering if you knew if this also held up in like queer relationships.
I don't know as much about that. And I don't know, I'm sure there might be a study that's done now looking specifically at that. I want to look into that and see. Yeah. Because, yeah, this is purely just sort of preference. Like, do you prefer, and some people, honestly, like looking at, some people might actually prefer this face, just looking at the face aesthetically, and some people might prefer that face. And it really, this is not so much like male-female lines, always, it's just what that person finds physically attractive or aesthetically attractive. This is just the slightly more masculinized, this is the more feminized. I don't know. Maybe should we take a poll and see who thinks which one looks more physically attractive? You like this one? Well, just raise your hand if you think it looks nicer, like to your eye. You're like, oh, I like that. This one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. This one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like exactly split. Totally split. You see that? And that's not falling down sex lines or gender lines or whatever. It's just what you find attractive. So yeah, that's a good question, Alex. I'm going to look more into that and see if there's specific studies focusing on that. So there's some of these apps and different things. You can look at that. Studies have also found that people are attracted to faces that are somewhat similar to their own. There's these weird studies they do where they put people in a room and they have numbers on them, but they can't see their own number. It's kind of rating them based on overall physical attractiveness, symmetry, all these different things. And they have the people mingle around and talk to other people, and they have to pair up, and they wind up pairing up with people that are rated in similar ways to them. But they can't see the numbers, so they have no idea. It's really interesting. So they're somewhat similar to their own or similar facial features. Ideas of this evolutionary ideas that there might be cues of kinship or like connectedness, like we come from like a similar background or ancestry. This is called the inclusive fitness theory. So there's this kind of cues of kinship that you gravitate towards sometimes. This is an example, and you might not think these two individuals look like each other. You go, he's black, she's white. They don't look alike, do they? But they sort of do, actually. If you put their faces in apps and analyzers, they have very similar cheekbones, very similar jaws, and they're attractive. They have nice features in general. They have a lot of good symmetry qualities. They're drawn to each other together for a long time. This was Heidi Klum and Seal. I think they have 6 kids. They're divorced now. I think they're no longer together, but they're still friends. Usually these individuals are not sexually attracted to these people. So they're drawn to them based on similarities. But many of those individuals will report or wind up being just friends. So it happens quite often. And one idea of this evolutionary theory is avoidance of inbreeding, risk of unhealthy offspring. Like, oh, we might actually be related or too closely related, too similar. We look and are too similar, so you want to avoid that. Does this make sense? Yes? Okay. So what about smell? Smell, sexual signaling, and attraction are huge in other mammals. Okay, there's butt sniffing, there's pheromones, there's smelling the other animal from far away, from miles away. Smell and pheromones have really important roles in sexual interactions and behavior. Countless examples in the animal kingdom. Horses will actually smell pheromones from the female horse and like suck in the air to get the pheromone chemicals up into their nasal cavity and their mouth so that they can perceive whether it's a female and whether she's in estrus. Also dogs, a lot of these chemicals let the other individual know their identity, right? Sort of their information about their sex, their type, their receptivity, all of that. So pheromones are secreted or excreted chemical signals that change the behavior or physiology of another member of the same species. So these are airborne chemical signals that get taken to the other individual, and they can perceive that, and it changes their behavior and their physiology. There's a lot of different types. There's big, broad classes of chemicals that fit into these pheromonal signals. They're used from bacteria like E. coli to mammals, all over the place in the entire animal and bacterial world. So things like sea urchins, marine animals, primates and monkeys, insects. These are cute little rats. I thought this was so adorable. They had little teddy bears. It was the cutest thing ever. Cute little rodents. A lot of insects like butterflies, moths, all these. They release these chemicals, and it gives all this identity information to other members of their species. I have a lot of cute pictures in here I found for just to represent the idea of these cute little orangutans smelling a rose. Sex pheromones relay sexual information. There's a lot of other pheromones that are actually alarm signals or identity signals or letting them know where to go and where to find a particular resource. Sexual pheromones are information about sex, genetics, and receptivity. When I say receptivity, that means are they receptive to copulating or mating? Okay, so all that kind of information. Also, availability of the female for breeding, so estrus, information about the male's genotype and species. So information about the male's genetics and identity can be picked up by pheromonal chemicals by the females of many species. All right, so in other mammals, there's a chemical in the adult male rat's urine, or mice, a lot of rodents' urine. It actually triggers the onset of puberty and synchronizes female rat estrus cycles. So they line up at the exact same time, and they start synchronizing. We talked about this in women, right, in human females. This was described a long time ago as the Witten effect. And this is where really biologists went, oh, there's a lot of smell, chemical signals, pheromones, that affect the reproductive cycles of the other sex. There's a pheromone in female rat urine that signals estrus to the male rats. There's female rhesus monkeys. When they're ovulating, this is a male, when they're ovulating, they secrete copulins, which are little fatty acid chemicals, and these increase the sex drive in the male monkeys and makes the males go crazy. So females ovulate, they release copulins, this pheromone, males pick it up and they have an increased sex drive and they start getting really active in pursuing the females. So this has all been established already a long time ago. Hamster vaginal secretions, they secrete aphrodicin, like aphrodisiac. Aphrodicin attracts the males, that's another receptive. Saliva of male pigs have an androgen they release, it increases female sexual receptivity. So all these, they can do it in controlled experimental settings and expose them to these compounds, and it changes their physiology and their brain and their behavior. All right, so human pheromones, that's where I sort of want to go. More recently investigated. It was debated and sort of controversial for a while, and the idea that maybe humans have it as well because we're mammals, we're in the animal kingdom. So in the last 10 years even, it's got a lot more attention, starting in the 90s and then all the way up till now. Still sort of controversial and debated. There's data, and there's some really good data and some really interesting studies, and then there's some mixed studies, and it's hard to actually, this is why, it is hard to experiment on a human being, right, in an ethical way and be able to get all the secretions of a human at various points throughout a cycle and then analyze those through very fancy chemical equipment like mass spectrometry and spectrophotometers and try to analyze all the components of those things and then take those things in isolation and see the effects that they have. So, and we're really, really complex. We can do that in a rat model in a cage. but it's very hard to do it in humans. So there's still a lot of sort of debated stuff and inconclusive evidence out there. But I'm going to review some of the pieces of evidence that came to light looking at chemical signals or pheromones in humans. Certain artificial musk-like odors are only smelled by adult women. They can't be smelled by children or prepubescent females, and they can't be smelled by males. So they're only perceived by certain individuals, by specifically adult females. They're maximally sensitive to them near the time of ovulation. So there's some of these studies looking at some of these musky smells that they can smell. Did you know that cologne and perfume, remember I said they're like billion, trillion dollar industries, and we talked about that, you know, making oneself more attractive. There's actually ferret and mink pheromones, chemicals in there that are secreted, taken from the anal scent glands of ferrets, and they're concentrated and isolated, and they're put into colognes and perfumes. And everybody goes, oh my God, it smells so good. And I thought, you know what you're smelling? You're smelling anal scent gland pheromones from a ferret, a mammal, because it's really active in ferrets. Well, it turns out humans, we like those same smells. We have those same, like, ooh, and so people have variability in what they like and what they don't. But you ever realize that what's in your perfumes, what's in the colognes, is pheromone chemical signals from isolated anal scent glands. And they have farms. They have tons of farms for these ferrets and minks and stuff, and that's what they use. Certain females can only smell some of these certain odorants. Other people can't smell all of them. The glands on the male skin, axilla, so armpit, penis, and scrotum, may actually make pheromones because there are secretions that are produced that have a whole combination of different chemicals, different hormones, and things that are secreted. Androstains are one of those. What does that sound like? Androstains. Type of androgen. This is a type of androgen. So there's estrane, estradiol related, cholestain. These get converted, and androstain is one of these. So it comes from cholesterol. It's similar to other androgens like testosterone. It's in the armpit secretions of men. Androstain concentrations have been studied in human secretions. They're 20 times that in the male axillary secretions than in female. It activates a certain area of the hypothalamus of men, so there are brain scans of females that smell or get exposed to the androstains, and it activates a specific VA region of the hypothalamus. There are other male experiments they did where they placed under women's noses the androstain. It enhanced positive mood and alertness, so it changed cognitive sort of alert or arousal, only in the presence of men though, so if there wasn't a man around, it really had no effect. So they do it, the chemical in combination with males around, no males around, and they rated the men more attractive. So in the presence of the androstain, this auxiliary chemical, they actually rated the same individual or the same attractiveness individual even more attractive. There's also the sniffing of men's dirty t-shirts. Early studies found that females preferred the smells of males with higher testosterone levels, so there were some of those studies they did, especially around the time of ovulation. Female human chemical signals or pheromones. Studies have looked at the vaginal secretions of women, especially around the time of ovulation, outside of ovulation, but really focusing mostly at ovulation. There's copulins. I keep making that big giant dot. There's copulins, which are fatty acids. These are little fats. Remember the copulins in the monkey, the macaque, changed male behavior. Female humans have copulins that are secreted around the time of ovulation. Could they have behavioral effects on men? Maybe. Remember, females have concealed ovulation, so they don't have estrous behavior. They don't change. There's no receptivity that's shown or displayed like other mammals, like other animals. But at around the time of ovulation, the secretions actually have a different chemical smell as well, and it's partially attributable to these fatty acids, the copulins. It has a buttery, sweet-like smell, and many females can actually notice the difference of kind of before ovulation and during ovulation, based on some of these secretions changing sort of the smell. So some experiments they did, these are kind of gross, I realize. Some of these get a little weird. And this is why it's hard to study this in humans. Not a lot of people are willing to do some of these things. They applied vaginal secretions all over women's skin and bodies, okay? And it increased the rated sexual attractiveness by males in the study. So they and a lot of these are heterosexual like studies, right? So they did this to the women and put them in a room, and they just had them assess and do all these things. Their rated sexual attractiveness was higher. Other experiments they did, female body odors. were rated as more pleasant to males when in the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. So they would rate either couples that have been together for a long time or newly together and rank their smell, their perceived niceness of their smell, rated higher in the follicular phase. Now remember the menstrual cycle, when is the follicular phase?
1 through 14.
Yep, it's like 1 through 14, right? So it's when the follicles are getting bigger and bigger and recruiting and developing, right? And it's right leading up to ovulation. So that's the first part of the cycle, the first half of the cycle. Dormitory effect. This is some really concrete evidence and one that I really like to cite and talk about because I know you all have been exposed to this. At some point, if you have ever dwelled with another female that is after puberty, you will experience this. Females living together gain synchronized menstrual cycles. This was first studied by the famous reproductive biologist Barbara McClintock, and she did a lot of other subsequent studies in humans and other animals, and found that this is called the dormitory effect. Synchronized cycles start to line up among females. Even more recent studies have found that an odor by the armpits likely contains the pheromone or chemical signal that induces that dormitory effect. So that's where it's coming from. It's going up through the nose and synchronizing the two females, or 3 or 4 or 5, however many, together on the same cycle. The frequency of exposure to males can alter the regularity and length of the menstrual cycle, and that's believed to be an auxiliary pheromone as well. So if there are males in the mix, it can change the regularity and the length of the cycles. Lots of different animal and human studies looking at both of these things. Yeah?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How fast does that change? So I have a family where it's there's more girls than men in it, and so when I go home, my sister's cycle changes to when my cycle hits, and so does my mom's. But when I come here, it's different. So is it
It's variable, totally variable.
Okay.
Some people, it just depends. Some people, you can link up pretty fast, couple months. It can happen in a couple months. And you get away from that, and you can start to veer off onto your original cycle or to a different cycle. It depends. And some people don't even cyclize really well with other people, or they pull other people into their cycle. They just stay where they're at. And everybody, like the moon and the sun and stuff, is all just in their little cycle. We call it an alpha menstruating female. I'm like, dang it, hate you. So it depends. It's a lot of variability. And usually it's a couple months. It's at least a couple months of living together. It can happen fast, it can happen slower, it depends on the person. So there's olfactory neurons. This is really interesting. In the brain, your nasal passages, you've got your whole mucous membranes up in your nasal sinuses. Olfactory neurons are up at the very roof, up in the top. You can't even stick your finger way up there. It's way up in the roof. Those olfactory neurons penetrate through your skull, through bones of your skull, and they go to your brain. They actually dive all the way in, and they make contacts or synapses, connections, with your GnRH neurons. Someone tell me what that is. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. You guys are learning so much. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. What does that regulate? Your cycle. LH and FSH secretion. You have olfactory neurons that pick up odors and smells and airborne chemicals going right to your GnRH neurons. So they could say go, or they could say stop. So that can control the female cycle, the menstrual cycle, directly through olfactory pathways or smell. Now this VNO, the veronasal organ, is present. It's right here. It's up inside the nasal passages. It's huge in some mammals, like dogs and cats, ruminating animals like cows and goats and sheep. They have really, really big ones. Ours, the human nasal cavity, right up in the medial septum, we have this little vestigial or small VNO. It's not big, it's not elaborate, it's barely there. But we do have olfactory neurons that are at the roof of the nasal epithelium. These are what penetrate through the bone and get to the olfactory bulb, which goes into the brain. That's the forebrain right there, and that's the olfactory bulb that carries those neural connections from smell into the actual brain. So pheromonal signaling is what happens in this common VNO in a lot of different animals and mammals specifically. Most mammals have it. And most mammals have a really big one. You can go in, dissect it out, and see it. It's very clear. Humans have a really small, which we consider sort of a vestigial or a leftover, a really small one. It's not big and giant like in the dog, okay? But does the absence of a large functional VNO mean that there's no chemical pheromones in humans? I don't know. That's where people have taken it. Well, there's a small one, or it's really small and vestigial, so maybe it's not that functional. So that's been sort of something that's been proposed. It's really, really small on the medial sort of nasal septum, and the olfactory neurons are up at the top at the roof right here, okay? So recent research, not only the VNO is involved in pheromonal signaling, some of those olfactory neurons up at the roof are actually involved in pheromonal signaling. So they're detected by the olfactory epithelium. They activate receptors on those olfactory neurons, and that sends information to the brain, okay, and to the hypothalamus as well. The best kind of repeatable study to date with evidence for human pheromones and chemical signaling in attraction is, you guys are probably aware of it, the sweaty t-shirt study. Not aware of it, okay, some of you might be, some not, so I'm gonna go through what they did because it's really cool. This same study was done by Wedekind and Penn in the 90s, and then it was replicated and done by other groups, they themselves, and even looking at rats and mice and monkeys and sheep, as well as humans. So this is one smell sort of pheromone study that still holds up and has a lot of information. So what they did is they recruited a ton of volunteers, male college students, female college students. They had the males wear a shirt and not use any cologne, no sprays, no deodorant, no soap, no lotions, no products. Wear that shirt for 3 days, let it get really stinky, sweaty. It's gross, right? Okay. I think they reimbursed them like $50, $20 or something. I don't know. So they wore it around. They played basketball. They did all their stuff. They bagged their shirt, zipped it up, put it away. They all got IDs, and then those bagged up shirts were given to all the female volunteers. Their whole job was just to sniff, just do sniff check, and then rate the smells, rate the shirts. Okay, so they got to smell and go, ooh, got nope, and ooh, this is not bad. Like this one. That's the good pile. So they sort of ranked them according to how they perceived the smell to be, whether it was good or whether it was bad. They smelled the male's dirty shirts, ranked them on smell, attraction, like liking that smell or really disliking that smell. They took DNA samples, they got blood from every participant, all the males, all the females. They took blood samples, and they looked specifically at immune function genes. The MHC genes, called the major histocompatibility complex genes. These are a few different complexes in humans that really help to target and protect against foreign invaders, pathogens, microbes, viruses, bacteria, diseases. And the more diverse repertoire you have of these MHC genes, the better your immune system can target different pathogens, okay? So they genotyped all these individuals, the males and the females, specifically focusing on these MHC genes at several locations across the chromosomes. And they found that the women were attracted to the men most genetically different from them in these genes, specifically looking at the MHC genes, which have immune function, okay? Now notice, they're not looking at ethnicity or race or ancestry or any of those things. It's specifically looking at the genotype of MHC1, MHC2, basically the genetic dissimilarity of the females' genes versus the males. The females were most attracted to the ones that were most different. All right, can you see what this might mean? What are the implications of this? This is a cool, it's been done and replicated. Yeah, Jada.